Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really high-stakes commercial puzzle.
Hmm.
It's that agonizing period right after a disaster hits. If you run a school, a clinic, any kind of city building, you know the pressure to reopen isn't just immediate, it's brutal.
Right.
And that clock starts ticking the second the water starts pouring or, the fire department leaves.
And we're diving into sources that really frame a core dilemma for any commercial operator in that moment.
Exactly. There are two very distinct paths you can take. You have integrated recovery on one side, and on the other, what the sources pretty harshly label, fractured recovery.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to really analyze this claim that one of these paths dramatically compresses your downtime, while the other almost guarantees it'll expand.
And if you're listening, you need to know how to move fast, how to move strategically, because it all starts with the recovery architecture you choose.
That's a good way to put it.
And we really need to emphasize that in commercial recovery, success isn't just about the quality of the restoration anymore. That's just table stakes.
That's the bare minimum.
It's the bare minimum. True success is really measured by three things now: speed, precision, and maybe most importantly, ironclad documentation.
Why that last one so much?
Because for a commercial operator, every single hour your doors are closed, you're bleeding revenue, you're risking liability, and you're eroding that reputation you've built in the community.
Okay, so let's look at what the modern expectation is. The sources suggest that the bar for managing a loss event is, well, it's become impossibly high.
It's a massive operational lift.
It is. It's not just about calling a cleaning crew anymore. You're expected to execute faster mitigation. We're talking hours, not days.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make documented salvage decisions on the fly, synchronize these really complicated rebuild scopes, and make sure there are fewer handoffs.
And that you have a predictable cycle time.
Right, and on top of all that, every dollar you bill has to be audit ready from day one.
It's a huge ask, especially when you're recovering from a shock event, like a massive water leak or a complicated fire.
And what are the environments that are most affected by this?
Well, think about places where continuity is just non-negotiable. We're talking schools, county and city buildings, clinics, retail spaces, manufacturing plants.
Even churches.
Even local churches, yeah. These are facilities with complex, often expensive structural materials, specialized flooring, and contents that are just incredibly sensitive to moisture or smoke.
And the regulatory side of things is intense, especially for, say, a school or a clinic.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't just vacuum up the water and reopen the doors. You've got certification hurdles, pathogen controls, HVAC checks, all of which have to be documented perfectly before you get that green light to operate.
Exactly. And you combine that regulatory pressure with the complexity of the materials like historical wood in a civic building, and you start to see why the old way of doing things just collapses.
So what is the central risk here? What's the one flaw that just undermines all those modern expectations we just laid out?
It's fragmentation. The research points to fragmentation as the core operational sin.
Fragmentation.
Yeah. The problem is, when you bring in multiple unaligned vendors, instead of creating efficiency, you end up with a compounding of delays and losses.
Because nobody owns the full cycle.
Nobody owns a full cycle. Everyone is just waiting on someone else to sign off.
Okay, that brings us right to our definitions then. We have to clearly define these two models to understand why fragmentation is so destructive. Let's start with the one most prone to collapse, patchwork recovery.
Right.
The sources define this by having many vendors. You've got one for drying, another for contents, a third for the rebuild, maybe even a fourth for specialized cleaning.
And each one has their own scope, their own timeline.
Exactly, their own communication cadence. And that inevitably leads to huge gaps in documentation. There's no central source of truth.
And liability blind spots.
Huge ones. And when you combine all those factors, the research is pretty clear.
Yeah.
The result is a guaranteed higher severity of loss.
It's baked into the model.
It is. So contrast that with what the sources propose as the solution: turnkey recovery.
This model is built on one single accountable restoration partner.
One
partner who manages everything in parallel: the mitigation, the documentation, and the final rebuild. The critical outcomes are a unified chain of custody for all your assets, a material-first salvage strategy.
and what you called synchronized billing intelligence.
Exactly.
But wait a minute, doesn't that seem risky? Why does the source claim one partner is always better than, say, bringing in the best local specialists for each job? Don't you lose some of that expertise?
That's a really fair challenge.
Yeah.
But the research doesn't argue against specialization. It argues against siloing.
Ah.
The problem with the patchwork model is that those specialized teams, they don't talk to each other. Or worse, their scopes actually conflict.
Right.
A turnkey recovery demands a single partner who has the capacity and the tech to coordinate all of those teams, whether they're internal or external, under one umbrella of documentation and accountability.
So if I'm hearing you right, turnkey is essentially about minimizing all that operational friction and maximizing coordination.
That's it.
It's about treating the recovery as one single system, not a bunch of separate projects stacked on top of each other.
That is precisely the core distinction. Those friction points in a patchwork system are what eat up all the time.
Okay, so let's unpack that friction. When you're in that patchwork model, what are the immediate failure points? Where does the system break first?
The first symptom is always dispatch. You have a massive leak at 3 in the morning. Who do you call?
Right.
The operators might call a reconstruction firm, who then says, oh, you need a specialized drying crew. And that crew might not respond till morning. That delay right there is where the damage clock starts running hard.
And once the different teams finally do show up, what's the next problem?
It's scope confusion.
Yeah.
The drying crew is only focused on moisture targets, so they might start tearing out saturated drywall.
And then the reconstruction crew arrives and realizes that drywall could have been dried in place.
Exactly. If the first team had used targeted injection drying methods, or if the decision to remove it wasn't even documented for the insurer, that duplication of effort is just wasted time and money.
And the material decisions stall. That's huge for these commercial facilities with expensive, specialized materials.
Absolutely. Think about a custom wood floor or a unique retail fixture. In a patchwork model, the first crew on site might just default to replacement because they don't have the expertise or the mandate to save it.
The decision stalls because the right person isn't there at the right time.
Right. And if that material isn't protected in the first 24 to 48 hours, the environment makes the replacement decision for you.
And meanwhile, all the paperwork, the engine of the entire claim, is splintering.
It splinters into 3 or 4 different reports from 3 or 4 different companies. The drying charts are over here, the content logs are over there.
The mess.
It's a total mess.
Yeah.
And naturally, when the adjuster tries to piece it all together, billing accuracy just plummets because the full coordinated scope is impossible to reconcile.
And all of that chaos creates this huge operational black eye that everyone can see. Community optics get worse.
For sure. The project looks disorganized, it's prolonged, you have multiple crews rotating in and out, and all of that just guarantees that the cycle time increases.
So if we connect all those failures to the ultimate cost, what does that look like for, say, the CFO?
The picture becomes very clear. The result of all those breakdowns, the delays, the confusion, the splintered paperwork, is that downtime becomes the invisible cost driver for the organization. The actual cost of the restoration can become a footnote compared to the cost of lost business, lost reputation, and delayed services when the process is managed so poorly. That's the paradigm shift.
So the actual cleanup cost is just a fraction of the cost of being closed.
Precisely.
That elevates the recovery strategy from just a necessary expense to a vital business continuity function.
Absolutely. And that realization is why the sources are so adamant that the turnkey architecture is mandatory for survival.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The sources then dive into the specific operational advantages of the turnkey model. They give a detailed breakdown of 6 core pillars, using Servpro as the example. This isn't just theory, it's a specific, tested blueprint.
And these 6 pillars actively counteract every single one of those fragmentation problems we just outlined. They ensure coordination and documentation are built in from the start.
Let's start with that first problem, the delay. Pillar number 1 is a single 24/7 dispatch system. Why is that one system so crucial?
Because it removes that initial hesitation. You call one number, and you get a guaranteed, rapid local response that kicks off the process instantly.
And the sources stress that local component.
They do. This isn't just an answering service. It's a system that ensures a contractor with physical capacity and expertise is on-site faster, which, as we know, is critical for saving materials.
That speed is essential for pillar number 2, material first salvage. This seems like a massive financial differentiator. Can you give us an example?
Oh, certainly. In commercial losses, the replacement cost of specialty assets is just astronomical.
Yeah.
Take a large building with specialized engineered wood flooring that's saturated.
Right.
Replacing that floor could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and take months, pausing the entire rebuild. Material first salvage means that turnkey partner arrives with structural drying science expertise immediately.
They're trying to save it.
They're evaluating if they can save it,
Yeah.
using high-tech equipment and documented moisture targets. They focus on preserving the asset, not just tearing it out. That single decision can protect the balance sheet more than anything else.
Pillar number 3 deals with logistics and liability. A unified pack-out chain of custody. For an operator, what does this actually look like? Is it just labeling boxes?
It is so much more than labeling. This is about applying inventory intelligence to asset security.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking detailed barcoding, photographic logs of every single item, a documented chain showing who handled what and when.
So you can track everything.
You can. Think about it. If a $50,000 server or sensitive client files or a box of pharmacy meds goes missing because 3 different crews handled it in a patchwork system, that's a massive liability event.
Right.
This unified chain provides an unassailable audit trail. It just eliminates content loss disputes.
Okay, so the 4th pillar tackles the core time suck of the patchwork model, parallel mitigation and reconstruction. This is where you stop the waiting game.
Exactly. This is the difference between running in single-file line and running in parallel lanes. In the patchwork model, you wait for drying to be 100% done, then you wait for soot cleanup to be 100% done.
And then the rebuild team can finally start.
Right. Turnkey recovery runs these phases: drying, soot cleanup, odor removal, pathogen cleaning, and the rebuild prep work simultaneously. As soon as one section is dry and remediated, the rebuild team is staged and ready to go in that area.
That seems so much faster, but also way more complex to coordinate.
It is complex, but that's where the single point of accountability is key. It ensures the left hand always knows what the right hand is doing. Which leads us perfectly to Pillar 5, audit-ready billing intelligence.
This is where so many projects grind to a halt, the billing dispute. Why is this system so much better?
Because documentation isn't an afterthought. It's the engine driving the whole recovery. In a fragmented system, you get 3 different sets of invoices with 3 different scopes.
It's chaos.
It is. Audit-ready billing intelligence means that from the very first notice of loss, specific artifacts are being generated constantly. Photo logs, real-time drying charts, documented material decisions, communication trails.
So it's one single traceable story for
Right.
the auditor.
Exactly. It connects every mitigation step directly to the final rebuild cost in a clear, defensible way.
That is a massive advantage when you're facing an insurance claim. You avoid that pain point of confusing invoices that slow down the payout.
It turns a fragmented mess into a linear, provable narrative.
Okay, and finally, the 6th pillar, which I think is probably the most undervalued, community optics and staging.
This is all about protecting stakeholder trust. When you have a long project, and commercial rebuilds can take months, the source notes how critical it is to have intelligently staged reconstruction zones.
It has to look professional.
The site needs to look clean, professionally managed, contained. When a facility looks chaotic and disorganized for months, that damages neighborhood relations, it creates negative press, and it erodes the trust of your customers or patients who are waiting for you to reopen.
So site presentation is actually reputation management.
It absolutely is.
That seems like a genuinely holistic blueprint. It's designed to prevent every single failure point we talked about in the patchwork model.
It's a blueprint built for speed and for financial security.
And to show the value of the system, the source provides some really concrete examples.
It does. Let's go back to that commercial wood floor, that expensive structural asset. In one case, a wood floor was saved because mitigation began in the first 24 hours. This was only possible because the process was backed by documented moisture targets, detailed drying sequencing, and those material-first decisions that protected the balance sheet from a massive replacement cost. Without that rapid response, that asset is gone.
That proves the financial argument, but what about the compliance side for like a government or health facility?
That's where the documentation becomes a critical tool for reopening velocity. We see this in an example of a civic office that had a significant loss.
Okay.
The office got back up and running so much faster because the restoration used advanced, odor-safe surface cleaning and documented touchpoint intelligence. This helped the space pass critical audit thresholds for public safety.
So they didn't just get clean, they had documented proof of pathogen-grade cleanliness.
Exactly. And that minimized the bureaucratic delay that so often follows these events.
So what does this all mean for the operator who's listening right now? If we had to distill the entire argument down into one sentence, what's the core principle?
The core principle is this. Turnkey recovery wins because mitigation, rebuild, and documentation run as a system, not a sequence of vendor handoffs.
A system, not a sequence.
The system approach is inherently faster, it's financially safer, and it provides that non-negotiable accountability.
And if you're out there vetting a preferred partner, the sources give us a clear checklist, right? What should they be able to offer?
They give us a very clear list. They must have 24/7 dispatch that connects you instantly to local resources, real expertise in structural drying science, a proven unified pack-out chain of custody, and the capacity to handle the full spectrum water, fire, mold, and pathogen deep cleaning.
And if they can't do all five...
You're looking at a patchwork system.
Okay, we've spent this whole deep dive talking about what happens after a disaster strikes. But as you always remind us, preparedness is where the real value is. If the listener takes one actionable thing away today, what should they do right now to move away from the risk of patchwork?
The time to test your vendor stack is not when your facility is flooded. You need to pre-align with a restoration partner who can provide that full turnkey service. And you need to do it now.
And beyond just finding the partner.
There are critical steps you can execute today. Document your most valuable materials. Know what they are and where they are. Map your sensitive touch points for eventual cleaning. Label your emergency shutoffs clearly.
It sounds so simple.
It is, but it's crucial. And most critically, the source emphasizes building an emergency-ready profile, an ERP that includes specific contamination and restoration intelligence unique to your facility.
So that preparation sounds more like proactive risk management, not just, insurance paperwork.
It is, because prepared operators reopen faster, they save more materials, they shorten that critical cycle time, and they bill accurately the first time.
And that's what protects survival.
Acting now protects the 3 pillars of your commercial survival: your reputation, your balance sheet, and your reopening velocity.
A system, not a sequence. That is a fantastic concept to sit with. Thank you for guiding us through this.
My pleasure.